Welcome to the screencast. Today I will show you how to come from the old 5250 work with spool files like this into a newer and modern world with web-based Web 2.0 application where you have the same work with spool file but presented in a more natural way on a browser, just like this. To do this, I will use a web framework called ExtJS. It's a JavaScript library, and it will do all the nasty stuff needed to actually move the data from the system I and to the web. We'll present it in a more user-friendly way. On the system I will use the IceBreak server, and on the IceBreak server I will create a little REST service. Actually, I will create two. One REST service that is producing the list of spool files, and another REST service that will return the spool file to the client as a PDF stream file. It's a very small project. It only has 5 components, and the screencast is divided into these 5 steps, and you will see how to actually implement this application. The first step is actually to convert the spool file into a PDF, and for that purpose I'm using a toolkit called JPL Tools, and you can find it by clicking on this link in my presentation. It's a French toolkit. Just to take a little search on the internet and you can search for spool file to PDF, and soon you will find this toolkit actually. So basically, after you have downloaded and compiled this toolkit, you're ready to convert your spool files with a command that is called spool file to PDF. So basically, that is just a small CL program that's encapsulating the JPL tool, and in the toolbox you will find the spool file to PDF conversion tool. So as you can see, what it does, it takes the unique identification for a spool file, which actually is the job name, the username, the job number, the spool file name, and the spool file number as input parameters, and the output parameter is my work stream file where I want to put my PDF. So the next step is I want to use this little spool file to PDF CL program I've just created. In my RPG program, I'm just creating the prototype for the CL program. Maybe in a real-world application you would prefer to put it in an include file. Anyways, I've just put it in directly into my RPG program here. I need some local variables for my stream file I want to produce, and a little string for if anything goes wrong. So the first step is actually to produce a unique file name. And I'm using the built-in function timestamp, which is pretty unique actually for each call you make to it. So that will be sufficient for my little application here. Maybe you can find a better solution for that. But I will just use the timestamp as my file name. I will suffix it by PDF because it's a PDF file I'm producing. And I'm putting it in the system root by the forward slash. The next step is to tell the client that it is actually a PDF file I am transferring from the system I to the client, and that is done by simply changing sending the MIME type of the document, and that has to be done as the very first in my IceBreak application. And since it is a PDF file, the Adobe Reader will be kicked in. That is a plugin in the browser. So you need to set up the cache. The file will not be removed by the browser before the PDF Reader has actually taken a look at it. And now we come to the point in the application where I actually do the conversion of my spool file. I take all the parameters directly from my URL, my job name, my username, my job number, my spool file, and you can see I take my spool file number, and internally I will put the output for the spool file conversion in my temporary PDF stream file. And now the real magic is actually one line of code where I am including this output from the conversion. So the include statement in IceBreak is actually reading the stream file and putting the complete stream file into the response object. The response object is returned to the client as is. So if it works and the stream file could be served, I'm ready to remove it. I have no use for it any longer because now it's actually put into the browser and I'm done with it. So as you can see, it is a real RPG program. The last thing I'm doing in the program is to set up the last record and I'm golden. That's it. So the service is actually called showSpool.aspx, and a little trick is that I'm putting in an extra suffix called PDF. So even though the browser will not see the MIME type, it can mimic that out from the suffix of the application. IceBreak is looking at the first suffix and determines that is an ASPX program, an RPG program that will be called, and the last suffix is used by the browser to determine the type of data actually sent. And the rest of the URL is parameters, as you just saw before: my job name, my username, my job number, spool file name, and so on. And if I press enter here, it will actually load the PDF file. And we can see that it actually works. So you can see this is my spool file converted into the PDF. Okay, the next step is actually to create a REST service that is listing all my spool files. I will use some APIs from IBM to retrieve the list of spool, and then we'll convert the list of spools into a JSON object with the IceBreak server. The list spool file API is used here. What it does, it actually takes a number of parameters describing which kind of spool files I'm interested in and returning the spool files into a user space. The first step is to produce the user space. So I'm using the create user space API from IBM. And I'm creating a temporary user space in Qtemp. Next step is to list all my spool files, and in this case I'm just taking the current user and it will be from all output queues with all form types and all user data. I am retrieving as a pointer to the user space, so I have a data structure that is based on that pointer. So my complete spool file information is on a based structure. So the next step is when I'm producing the JSON, the array of objects. I iterate through all the entries in the list. Each of those entries, I will actually just take the spool file name, the job number, and so on, and place it into a named pair list. You can see the job name is placed in an attribute called job name. The user ID, the username, is placed in the username attribute, and so on. So for each of the elements in the user space, I will actually produce an object in JavaScript object notation. And finally, when I'm done with the user space, I'm just deleting it. Quite simple. And yeah, you can see this is an RPG program. I am setting up the last record as a final step. So the next step is to see if that actually works. http://dkexp05. This is my list spool service. So when I press enter, it will return the list of all the spool file that is for user NLI, which is actually me. So you can see this is object notation. It starts with the bracket, and each spool file entry is surrounded by a curly bracket. So this is the way you are presenting data with JavaScript object notation. It's very easy to produce a JSON object, and on the client side it is very easy to read it actually by an AJAX call. Okay, the next step is to use the JSON Store, and basically it's just an AJAX call from my client that will execute the list spool file REST service I just created a moment ago. Okay, so let's dive into how this code actually looks. When we are looking at ExtJS application, it is a web application totally written in JavaScript. So maybe you remember my list spool file service I just wrote before, and maybe you also remember the columns in my result set of my service, my job name, my username, my job number, and so on. Let's just have a little look at the output from the server. You can see we have my job name, my username, my job number, my spool file name, and so on. We have all these parameters. We have to map these columns into something useful for the client. So the HTTP proxy is calling my service, and the service is returning the JSON, and the JSON is actually interpreted according to which columns I'm put into my JSON reader. This was my data store. The next step is to use the grid. The grid is my visual component in this application, and again I want to use the same columns that you just saw before, but now I need to describe what will be the header, what is the text I want to show for the user, and I need to map the column into a column in my JSON. So my data index is my name of which column I want to show in this grid column. So you can see my job name is mapped to the job name in my JSON store. The username is mapped to the username in my JSON store, and so on. So this is the way I'm describing which columns is used in my grid. And you can see my panel, I actually have placed my grid. That is one of the components, but also I have a little area in the bottom where my PDF file. The real magic here is when I click on a row, the row information is returned to this function. My detail panel is then rewritten with the template containing an iframe, and the iframe is just simply loading the show spool file service, which again returns the PDF file. So that completes the way we are communicating the PDF file into the viewport in the bottom of the screen. This is the way that this JSON store is converted into this. You can see when I click on a row, the content is actually replaced by the PDF. So for any of the rows in my grid, you can see we can just click on it, and the spool file is converted to PDF, and the PDF is displayed in the bottom of the screen. So after selecting a spool file, I can navigate around in the spool file. I can resize the information so it's more readable, and I can page through the spool file as I want to. Okay, finally we have a little piece of HTML. The only purpose is to load the ExtJS. In this case I'm using the built-in version 2 ExtJS that is shipped with IceBreak. But you can download the newer version if you want to. But for this little sample, the built-in ext 2.0 is sufficient. And after we have loaded the ext framework, you can see the work spool file JavaScript I just wrote before is loaded. And when the JavaScript runs the work spool file JavaScript, it will place all its content in this tiny div with the ID of main. So the complete application is actually placed into the main of this HTML, and that's all there is to it. Thanks for watching this screencast.